It is the Anfield Wrap after Liverpool have gone to Crystal Palace and taken 3 massive points. I am Neil Atkinson and I am joined by Lizzi Doyle, by Emilia, Bona and by Paul Senior for this one. And the first thing to say, Emilia, is this. It's a massive 3 points. There was an invitation to close a little bit of the gap on Manchester City. Before we get into the ins and outs of the game, that was Liverpool's number one job in London yesterday. Just close that gap. Haven't been given the chance to do so by Manchester City.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you were saying the other day there's not been a single result so far in the league where I haven't gone, this is really important that we now win this one. But because that's the case, it's 9 points but with a game in hand, so let's say we're 6 points away from City, aren't we? And it feels like it's on. It feels like it could still be.
It's vaguely possible.
It's vaguely possible, but I'm ever an optimist and incredibly hopeful, Neil, and I think we can call it a title race, because I know it's reliant upon them dropping points and us being absolutely brilliant consistently, but we can be absolutely brilliant consistently, and we have been and we will be. So I think there's a chance that they drop points against several of the fixtures that they've got, and all we can do is just keep winning.
We can be absolutely brilliant consistently, Paul, but yesterday's becomes a really good example of the fact that we didn't manage to be really good consistently for 90 minutes. It is a really strange game. It's a game of 3/3, not 2 halves. Palace don't have a shot until the 39th minute, and then they have 7 chances and chances to make chances until 70. Really good chances a lot of the time as well. And then they only get one more back to the end of the game. What changes here? Is it us? Is it them? Is it both? Do we encourage them? It's such a strange thing because we were so good for 35.
Yeah, I did a rare tweet praising us, and as soon as I did that, we went to absolutely terrible. So I'm blaming myself for that one. But no, the manager said it, didn't he? We showed how good we can be and just how bad we can be, and we did do that because up until like the second goal, I thought we were absolutely outstanding, as good as you'll see, considering there's no Salah.
As good as you'll see any side.
Yeah, any side, especially at Crystal Palace away. And I know, obviously, last year we battered them, but it is a hard ground to go to. I've been there, I was going to say hundreds of times, but lots of times, and stood behind metal posts, not being able to see much of the game. But it's a hard place to go. It's a really good atmosphere. It's a bit like old West Ham. It's a bit like Goodison. It's a proper football ground. And yeah, it's never pleasant, especially when obviously you let them back into it, which we did. But when you get up 2-0, I think you go, oh, this could be like last year. You could go 5, 6, 7. And then all of a sudden you just take your foot off the gas a little bit, and Palace fancied it.
Do you think they did just take the foot off the gas, Lizzie? Because, there's a lot of factors here. I think there's something I will come on to later in the show, but I do want to say now, and I wish I'd actually put it in my piece, Arsenal draw 0-0 with Burnley. And that game on Thursday night, it was an emotional affair. There was a lot of energy expended in Liverpool getting the result. So, 35 minutes is the point at which sides do sometimes begin to tire a little bit. That's 35 minutes of, you need half-time and then you come out. Do you think it is as simple as that? Do you think that there's something else going on? Because there's just been times this season where this side can look excellent, but it can also just look abject for a period, and that's what we saw.
I don't know about this game in particular. I think as well, like, it's quite easy to think about Liverpool who just go and roll teams, week in, week out. However, you're still going to another team's ground who are 2-0 down, and then they need to come at you. And that will happen. They will have a period of the game. However, they just had a bit more of a period of the game than I would have hoped. And also at a stage where I didn't think they would have it. Usually you see teams get to half time, then the home team will come out, and that's when you usually feel it. And they did do that, I thought, after half time as well. They sort of picked up where they left off in Palace. So I think it's a bit about, I think the foot off the gas thing isn't intentional. I think it's a mental thing as well. I think playing on Thursday, having the pressure over City dropping points on you, which it plays into a part. You understand how big this game is. And we've all been there where we've had incredible highs, like, and then the next few days you feel exhausted just mentally and physically. And I'm not saying that they were, but I think sometimes that can play a part in it. I don't think they got necessarily complacent. I don't think there was any like sort of laziness or anything like cockiness. It didn't feel like that at all. Probably just dropped off a little bit concentration wise, and then they got punished, didn't they, in the second half for it.
The key thing for me, Emilia, is I think that 2 things happen. I think they do drop off a little bit, and then simultaneously as they drop off, as they lose that bit of intensity, there's a couple of little sloppy errors. So Matip does, the ball that Matip plays across the penalty area that goes badly wrong, that does trigger Crystal Palace suddenly feeling encouraged. And I think the two things sort of happen at once. Well, three things even. Liverpool lose a bit of intensity, that happens to all teams, but then they're sloppy with it, that doesn't happen to all teams. And then the third thing that happens is that Crystal Palace suddenly go, hang on, we're in our ground and we're quite good, we can get at these. And I think those three things all sort of coalesce together on about 35 to 40.
Yeah, no, they do definitely work together, because I was going to say they don't get the goal because of us being sloppy. They get the goal because it's a really good pass, and also because their fans are properly behind them. As soon as they get a single sniff of we could be back in here, like, that ground goes absolutely ballistic, which is great for them and awful for us, and it must be really difficult to play against. But I think that the goal that they get isn't a result of Liverpool's sloppiness, but it's probably encouraged by Liverpool getting a bit sloppy and them going, oh, hang on, like, we might be able to do this here. I think that, as Lizzie said, there's a tiredness kind of physically and also mentally. And I know that it was said in the post-match show, and obviously, like, it's a fairly obvious point to make, but they needed to win it in the amount of time that they won it in, and they did. It's just that it then didn't feel comfortable because they win one back, and then we spend the rest of the game going, oh, fucking hell, this could end up being 2-2.
And just on that, there's an idea here, isn't that? Let's just imagine Palace start really strong, Liverpool start sloppily, we get to about 30 minutes, Palace have had a ton of chances, we've hung in there, and then Liverpool play the way they played for the first 35, for the next 35, go 2-1, and then there's the bit of the dead period and we win the pen. We're all bouncing on this show going, oh my God, the way Liverpool recovered. It is worth pointing that out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they played the way that they needed to play, having played an incredibly intense game on Thursday. Do you know what I mean? It's intense for the first 35 minutes. They do the job and it's all wrapped up, and aside from Palace getting that goal, that means we can't just relax for the rest of it. They kind of do what they need to do in the time that they needed to do it in, given the circumstances.
It's a big 3 points for us, the manager says afterwards, Paul. I'll go through the full quote. Big 3 points for us. The first 35 minutes was some of the best stuff we played all season. You can see how good we can be. Someone should have a proper explanation of what happened after. Your job, lad. I don't understand it 100%. In the second half, we were not compact. We became sloppy in the last line. All their chances were set up by us pretty much. We wanted a little break on the pitch, but that was not possible. I actually think he is doing a bit of his explanation there, and I suspect what he says internally will be a little different. Before the match, he said this is like a final for us because we've had this run. And, when you begin to think of all of these things on top of one another, what he's saying there, you get the impression Klopp does sort of understand what's happened. That doesn't mean he's happy about it, it's fair to say.
No, and listen, we wanted a little break on the pitch and it wasn't allowed. Sort of tells you we're coming to the end of what's a difficult period with AFCON and League Cup, and obviously fixture cancellations prior to that, and COVID and whatever, and things. I think everyone knows, even from a COVID perspective, things are calming down. You're not going to be seeing, well, you might still see a couple of outbreaks in clubs, but they're not going to be quite as frequent as they have been over the last 2 months. So getting through this sort of unscathed or conceding one goal in the last couple of weeks, I think we've had to find a way to play without Salah and Mane, but even Keita, who was probably part of your first 11, and Thiago being out and whatnot, that game, especially with the City results, put a bit more pressure on the fixture and could have become a bit of a banana skin, so just finding a way through it after what was a really difficult game on Thursday, it's a massive 3 points, and it's one that we were always going to have to go through the mill a bit on it. But because you go up 2-0 early, as you say, you think, oh, we're cruising here, then we weren't allowed to cruise.
Do you think, I think it's really interesting to say this, Paul, because it's the thing I would not have expected. I feel a little bit like, and I think it was almost the case to a certain extent against Brentford. It was possibly there during the game against Arsenal. I think it's marked in this one against Palace. I think we miss Mane and Salah, not to get ahead in those games, but once we are ahead, both the defensive business that both of them have, it's more marked from Mane, his ability to snap into his full back and the attacking winger behind him in certain areas, defensively coming all the way back. Salah both terrifying a team and keeping them back and pinning them back, but also he's very good at shutting down his full back much higher up the pitch with little bits and pieces. I think really interesting that I actually felt that's where we missed them, and in all of these games arguably we've maybe missed them a little bit more, as I say, not at 0-0 but at when Liverpool have been up 1-0, 2-0, and in the Brentford case, obviously 3-0 doesn't really matter or feel the same.
I don't think in an ideal world he'd have Jota and Firmino on the pitch all that much as well. I think
at the same time together.
At the same time, yeah. And I think obviously when he brings Minamino on, it seems to change the game a little bit. And people will probably say, "Oh, well, I didn't think Minamino did much," but when he does touch the ball, he keeps it. And I didn't feel like we were doing that too much. So that in turn eases pressure because it lets you get reset. It lets you get your line that little bit higher and whatnot. So we were on the ball a bit more, where I felt it was just going forward, Palace were getting it, and then it was coming straight back at us. And I mean, I thought the midfield was in 6s and 7s for a lot of the.
Well, that's strange, that, Paul, because I agree with you. But for me, for the first 35, come back to you, bring everyone else in. Jones and Henderson, I thought for the first 35, they're absolutely excellent. Yeah. They're doing everything that you want to do. They're nailing the job. Then the next 35, as you say, they're at 6s and 7s. They're at disarray. In the same way that I thought both centre halves looked the part.
Palace had a free run at Liverpool's defence, and you could see
that Anderson one. Yeah, he was picking them up.
Well, this is it, isn't it? And I thought, I kept looking. I thought Fabinho was probably Alisson's man of the match, but I thought Fabinho was sort of up there in that, and that's because he was sort of doing the job of 3 men on his own for such large periods of the game. Whereas, as you said, I thought Henderson in parts was okay, or Jones in parts was okay, but then there was a period where we were just exposed, and you were sort of looking where they were on the pitch, and he brings Minamino on for Oxlade-Chamberlain, I think partly to be a fourth central midfielder, but also relieve the pressure going forward, like I just said.
They were good to start, really good to start first 35, Lizzie, and we can't write that off. Jones, Henderson, as I say, I thought they were excellent for 35 minutes when Liverpool were in the ascendancy. I thought Robertson, obviously delivery for both goals was exquisite, constantly showing up and down the line, as I said before. Jones looking after the ball really, really nicely. They were just doing the thing. I think that, every player plays well in that early period, but it's marked to me that a couple of the players who go on and arguably disappear a little bit are so prominent in that first 35-minute spell.
Yeah, and I'd say probably one of them was Firmino. I thought that was the best he's played for a long time in that 35 minutes, and I was watching it thinking I was almost baffled. So I think this is too easy. I just did not expect this from this Palace game in terms of how decent I think they've been this season, and that it is always a little bit difficult to go there. But Firmino, for me, was one of the ones that stood out in that 35, but then really did sort of drop off in the rest of the game. Jones as well, I think. I felt like we lost a lot of the midfield, and we were losing a lot of balls in midfield. It felt like there was no control towards the end, but I suppose we're talking about the first 85 minutes, where we were great, and that's where we got the goals. And even Oxlade-Chamberlain getting that goal, it's very similar, I think, to the goal he scored the other week. And
Brentford,
and it's and there was just the Robertson crosses, the Robertson delivery. He looked absolutely on form. For me personally, I would have put him as man of the match if it weren't for Alisson. I thought he was excellent, and it is a shame that we did drop off, but for those 35 minutes I thought this is the team that we've seen the last couple of weeks that's been able to dig in and almost that didn't miss Mane and Salah to that point, and have quietly impressed. And I think part of that, on the whole, just as a bigger picture thing, I think part of that is being Oxlade-Chamberlain playing in that front three and giving us a bit more of an extra option and bringing width. And listen, I agree. I thought that Minamino done a decent job when he come on. However, I also thought that when, you have to forgive me games, I can't remember when he first took out Minamino and swapped him for Oxlade-Chamberlain.
That was between Arsenal and Brentford.
Yeah, so I felt like we seen a difference then, and I think you've seen that difference, and that was probably the difference in the first 85 as well.
I think Chamberlain, Lizzie, come back to you. Chamberlain deserves a fair bit of credit, I think, in that he's very much wants to be a centre midfielder. The first game against Arsenal, when it was Jota right, Minamino left, Firmino through the middle, and we just don't attack well, and we can all be honest about that. When he brings Chamberlain, let's be clear, he's not Mo Salah.
No.
But he's very committed to doing his best impression, I think, and I think that takes a fair bit to do. And off the back of it, he's got 2 goals, and they're both very Mo Salah goals. Is the thing I point out. And
very striker attacking goals, aren't
they? And that's, to me, that's the if he was rifling them in from 20 yards, I'd go, oh well, that's these are like gambling at the back post on both occasions.
Yeah, it's not a typical Oxlade-Chamberlain goal. If you were to sit here now and go, describe me a typical Oxlade-Chamberlain goal, it's driving through the midfield outside the box. That's what it seems to be, and I think what that shows to me is confidence. I think a lad who doesn't have confidence doesn't score those goals from those angles. And for a lad who doesn't really play in that position and has been knocked for playing in the front three, by the way, over the last couple of years, has come in and done a really decent job. Whether that's because he's not doing, I know a lot of the times when Oxlade-Chamberlain's come in to cover, it's been for that Firmino sort of role, which I don't think he's been as great as, to be honest, but I think he's really done his job and more in that he has scored the 2 goals. And if you would have said to me at the start of this run, when Oxlade-Chamberlain's playing in that front three on the right, out of Jota, Firmino, Oxlade-Chamberlain, who was going to get the goals, I wouldn't have put it down for him. And I think that's also testament to the lad.
I think he's the one out of our midfield that I would actually back to get goals. I think that's,
as in the front three or just in general?
No, just from the midfield, really. From them guys. I think it's. Listen, last summer, if you'd have said he was going to Wolves or whatever, I think he's a great guy, and he's done some good stuff for Liverpool, but I wouldn't have cried if he'd have left. But the one thing he does do is when he gets into the team and has a little flurry, he does provide some goals, and it's a different angle, really, from it's what you want a bit more from Keita or Thiago. You don't really see. I know they've got a couple in spells for Liverpool, but I think Oxlade-Chamberlain's maybe the most consistent to come in regularly and always find goals, if you know what I mean. And he's recovered from a bit of adversity, and I think that a lot of Liverpool fans had almost given up on him. And it's good. You can sort of see the value in why the manager keeps these lads around, and he said it before, is how do you buy footballers for this Liverpool team to come into the first 11? Well, sometimes it's not so bad having players like Minamino and Oxlade-Chamberlain who are sort of happy just to be in the squad.
Someone's got to be there.
You've got to have substitutes, and I quite often use the
Someone's got to be Liverpool's 18th best player.
Exactly, and I've watched Bayern Munich for years, and they don't apologise for having very strong benches. And I think when we look to bring players in, we only ever look at the first 11, and people are like, well, who's he going to play instead of? Well, you can just make up the squad, and that's how you win titles. And Man City don't apologise, and Bayern don't apologise, so why should Liverpool?
I do think as well, it will almost certainly, I think, be his last season for Liverpool, and I think this is the first proper chance he's had to get a bit of a run of games in. I think that when we've said about him previously coming in, and he's never gone back to what he was before the injury, but I think it's because he's never had enough of a run of games, and he's never had enough minutes on the pitch to be able to show what he can do. And I think when we talk about it, I get that the goals he's scoring are different, but I think when we talk about it being a Mo Salah impression, I almost think we're doing him a disservice, because he's not Mo Salah, and I think he's trying to fill a role on the pitch at the minute, but he's not trying to be Mo Salah. And physically, in terms of his speed, the pace, in terms of what he's able to do, you can't compare them, but in terms of stepping up to the role that he's been asked to do for quite a kind of extended period of time, he's more than done what we could have asked of him. And I think there would have been that fear that he might have left on a bit of a bum note if he'd let us down at this point, but he hasn't, and I think he can be really proud of what he's done.
I think it's important to say as well, Neil, is that before we lost Mane and Salah, he was playing in the midfield where he plays, and there was times where Naby Keita started, and I was questioning, why has he not started Oxlade-Chamberlain? Because he brings him in when we had a couple of injuries. He performs well, and then Klopp kept putting him in, so he was earning his place in midfield, never mind in the front three. And I think that's what we need to remember, is he's not just performed really well in a different position, he's performed well in the position that he wants to play in as well.
Other thing from that first 35, Emilia, just on that left-hand side, Robertson obviously gets the plaudits, two really, really good balls in that lead to Liverpool goals. But I felt him, Jones and Jota, I think at times we'll talk of him like Robbie Fowler, we'll talk of him like a poacher. Showed a lot of really good team play, really good link-up play in that period when Liverpool were on top. It wasn't the idea that Jota was just about to score, it was that he was bringing his teammates into play, and I think both Robertson and Jones benefit from that.
Yeah, I liked what you said on the post-match show yesterday about him being a bit of a transformer. That he's the footballer, that he's not, I mean, I'm not saying he's not the best at anything, because he's absolutely fucking brilliant, but as in he's not, there's not one type of thing where you go, that's the player that Jota is. It's that he can be what we need him to be in different situations, and I think that's why he's been such a surprise belter that I don't think any of us really expected to play the role in this Liverpool side, or at least at this point, kind of so quickly in his Liverpool career as he has. I think he was absolutely brilliant yesterday, and I know he doesn't really get anything, and there might have been a shout to just bring him off, but if you do, then we don't get the penalty, and we don't all get to have a massive laugh at that, so that's really good.
There's a thing, isn't there, you think about this Liverpool side from 17 pull through to 20 through to when it wins the league. That triangle on the left was predominantly, not always, but predominantly Robertson, Wijnaldum, maybe occasionally Milner in for Wijnaldum, but Robertson, Wijnaldum, Mane. That's what it was all the time. And so much of what Liverpool do is about relationships. For me, what's fascinating is that yesterday, obviously 2 points of that triangle had disappeared. But whilst Liverpool were on top, I thought the relationship between Jota, between Jones and between Robertson was absolutely perfect. And Palace could not live with it at all.
I think you see the benefits of longevity of a manager rather than an individual. I think that's it. So you've seen players from the academy come in, and Liverpool look like Liverpool at all times. There's a defined style, top to bottom, and it's quite an old thing that they used to get the academy teams playing the way the first team play and stuff like that. Well, maybe I don't know if they still do that or whatnot nowadays, but it is important that every one of these players now has been here for a while, and you can just come in and naturally look like a Liverpool footballer. So it doesn't matter if it's Wijnaldum and Mane ahead of Robertson. It could have been Tsimikas as well, and you still think that, yes, you would see a little bit of individual quality change, but stylistically Liverpool are going to play the same way, and it's good that Curtis Jones can do a bit of the Wijnaldum job, because you think that was that unique. to him, and now you're starting to see Milner's legs fall off a little bit, so it can't really be Milner. Last 10, getting into them sort of traditional English central midfielder way, that's fine for Milner, but we can't rely on him to do that really at Crystal Palace away now at this point in his career. So yeah, I thought in that first 35, I'm not a huge Curtis Jones fan, admittedly, but I thought he did really well. And it's always nice, like with Jota, that yes, he can look like a Robbie Fowler, as you say, number 9 in the 6-yard box, slotting that way, or he can score the goal that he scores against Arsenal. But I thought what was really good was the way that he links up with is a Trent to Jota to Robertson, is it the way the ball comes across for that goal. His link-up play there, and then he darts off like a traditional number 9, and that is very Fowler, I felt. So yeah, I'm a huge Jota fan. I think he's only getting better, and I said I always use the point he's younger than Anthony Martial, which I know I've been using that point for a few years, which tells you that Anthony Martial's not that young anymore.
They're still aging at the same pace as well, so it remains to be true.
But I don't think that people treat him like a young footballer.
Yeah.
Because he is a young footballer and he's only going to get better. We could have 8-9 years of Diogo Jota, which is exciting in itself, because you think when he gets to 27, 28, that's when he's going to be at his peak. So this is what he's doing now. Then I think we've got a few exciting years with him.
Absolutely. Then Lizzie, we'll do the dark stuff. Gallagher wins it in centre mid, they nearly get in. That's 36. Mata plays it across the box, the Elise chance, that's 39. Then we're hanging on for half time, having looked like, will it be 3 for Liverpool by half time? We're hanging on for half time. And I'll say it again, I think the encouragement is, I think this is the thing that is different from this Liverpool team to the one that wins the title, is that there are just phases in games where it encourages the opposition a little bit too much. That side, the side that wins the league in 1920, would drain enthusiasm out of the opponents. This one, it had done that for 35 minutes, and then it gave them a great big injection of it and went, go and enjoy yourself, boys.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is it felt like, that team that won the title, we all sat here and said out, and Klopp, mentality monsters like that, they did not switch off for one single second, and like you said, it was draining for the other side because they were just constantly on it. Whereas I feel like we're given gifts at this point, and it's really bloody frustrating to see. And I was screaming, I was watching it in the pub, and I was screaming at the telly because I just couldn't understand why they couldn't just be a little bit smarter with it. You're 2-0 up, you're 10 minutes to go before half time. The technical team, shit out your way to half time a little bit more. And we've had this problem in the last couple of games as well. I think it was with Chelsea. Why didn't they shit out the way to half time then? We've seen this before. Why haven't you learned? And you've learned, and that was against a bloody good opposition in Chelsea. Listen, I'm not taking anything away from Crystal Palace, but how have you not learnt your lesson from then? And I sound like I'm getting angry. I promise you I'm not, because we won. And it's lovely. But I'm just saying though, like they didn't need to put me under that much pressure, Emilia. And it just frustrates me that I feel like they haven't learned from it. And at what point do they? At what point does the punishment become too much? Do you know what I mean? Like, we concede those 2, don't we, before half time at Chelsea? The game runs out 2-2, but at what point will we actually go, does it take us to get beat in that sense? And that's what really sort of pissed me off. And I think as well, like, a lot of talk is about the high line. You've got to understand, like, Liverpool have been playing this way for God knows how long. Like you just said there about the Liverpool identity. This is how Liverpool play. Those defenders know that. And Crystal Palace would be soft not to try and pick out some sort of weakness or some sort of thing to exploit against a team that they know is 10 times better than them. So they picked out this high line, and listen, it was so clear and obvious within like about 2 of the chances. That was what they were doing. The ball over the top, direct, try and catch them off, and the pace from the lads that they had. And it just frustrates me that they didn't sort of like cotton onto it and like resurrect that quicker on the pitch.
Feels like it's always just before half time as well. I don't know why. And maybe that's one of those things where like you buy a red car and you see them everywhere. But like, there's never a good time to become sloppy, and there's never good times to give goals away. But it always feels like it's at times where we allow them to come back out after half time going, come on, we're still in this. And they get to come, like, we need to be re-energized by that break. But they very much are, with also a sense of hope that they can win something back from it again. And I think that it just always seems to be at the worst times in terms of giving them like a mental boost.
There's something for me, Paul, where there'll be a lot of there will be, and there has been, and there'll be highline chat, and we'll do the review and we'll be talking about it. But one of the core things when you do choose to play like that is there's got to be pressure on the ball. You've got to make the pass harder, and I think so. And this is where the manager will probably, if the manager's talking about it or asked about it in the near future, he'll say, but this isn't just one thing. As both Lizzi and Emilia have said, we've been playing like this for such a long time. Sides know about it. For me, the ball that, for instance, ends up leading to the goal, there's just not a ton of pressure on the lads who's playing the ball, and all the way through here, all of this is linked. And I think that this is what Liverpool have got to, and the brilliance of the goalkeeper, which we'll come on to, is also linked. Part of why we have this goalkeeper is because we play like this. So it's worth, it is worth remembering all of that. But you've just got to, if we aren't going to compromise on the line, and that does appear to be the case, then you've got to make sure you're pressurising the ball at all times.
Well, that's it. And it sort of goes back to that midfield point that I made earlier. Is I think there's people in that midfield who aren't currently at the peak of their powers, the captain included. And that's not me having a go at him. He's been asked to run again, and I think once you see Keita and Thiago back, I think you might see it not a prolonged periods of absence.
More the idea that games getting picked for all of them.
That's it, because there's no other choice, is there? Than that's the midfield. Who's in midfield this week? Well, who's available? And that's sort of been compounded by the fact that we don't have the forwards available. Origi's out, so Oxlade-Chamberlain's now having to play midfield, so that takes another midfield number away. So I can sort of understand the exposure of the midfield, because if you're just running out of legs, well, that's fine. And I think that's why getting to this point, and it's unfortunate that Jordan has the good sense to retire from international football, is that this would be a decent break for him, and he's probably going to go and not kick a ball for England, which frustrates me. And then
they're not playing, so don't worry.
Would England not play?
It's only because it's Brazil.
It's South Americans are playing, and AFCON's ongoing, so it's sort of a quasi-winter break.
Oh, sounds well. Okay, I'll take that. Well, I hope he goes onto a lovely beach.
You got any recommendations? Been anywhere recently, Paul?
Not spent much time. I'm going to get non-domicile status the way I'm going. But yeah, that's good. I didn't quite realise that. So. Yeah, good. Well, he looks like he needs a break. So I hope he gets. I've seen a few Instagrams of footballers where they've been jetting off. I just thought they were the rubbish ones that weren't getting picked. Seen a lot of Selhurst Park on Instagrams the last few days. So I think that's good news for Jordan. And then obviously we've got the benefit now of the Senegal-Egypt game as well, which is going to send one of the lads back earlier, guaranteed. So. Yeah, this is all good news, and it shows why it was such a defining point. But going back to your point on Alisson as well, yeah. I mean, I don't think this is his best season in a Liverpool goalkeeper's shirt. But there's been some saves he's made which has been at a level that I haven't seen him before. That back heel one is extraordinary. It's the time to react.
Yeah, he sees it before it happens. Like he's reacting before you even have time to process how the body's going to move.
You've got to be on your toes in that scenario, but the time to react, if he doesn't make such a clean contact on that, he could be in a world of trouble. But he does, and it's getting down from a standing start that quick is unbelievable goalkeeping for a fella who is big. He's not like your traditional. Like if you look at Kepa, who's a pure shot stopper. He's pretty small for a goalkeeper, quite agile. Where Ali's a big lad, and he gets down so quick. What a footballer.
He's Paul, I think, you mentioned that. I think he's been at the scene of a couple of crimes this season. Definitely. But the flip side is he's had some of his best games for Liverpool as well, and had some of his best moments for Liverpool. He's so unique in so much of what he does, and he's becoming more unique. That's the thing that grabs me. It's like, you're seeing something else. The save that it would have been offside, it's a handball save. He reacts to it. His hand does what it does. It knocks the ball a million miles up in the air. It's a handball save. It's not a football save. So much of what he does, I think, is just so unique, and it's almost difficult to process at times because he makes it look miraculous.
Yeah. You wonder whether he's played a lot of small-sided games as a kid or whatever. Where there's maybe foosball, not foosball. What's it called?
Yeah,
futsal.
Yeah. He played handball. That's the thing. He played handball.
So there's a bit of a difference in him in terms of, I don't know how whether it's been as a kid or what not, but. Yeah, he's a unique goalkeeper, one that I wouldn't swap for anyone in the world. And yes, I think he's lost his head in a couple of games so far this season, but when you see him yesterday, he's absolutely integral to this Liverpool team, and you know the current words is cheat code, and at times yesterday he was very much there.
It's that like the seeing things before they happen, and like as you say that the save that would for the one that would have been offside anyway. There is an increasing argument for him having a direct line to Jesus Christ himself, isn't there? It just makes no sense. It defies, like, miraculous is the right word, but it just seems to at some points defy like the laws of time and physics, what he's able to do and how he does it, and that kind of. It seems impossible until he just fucking does it.
It's funny, you know, because I don't think traditionally I've ever really thought one of our managers has really like had the goalkeeper as his favourite, and I feel like Alisson might be the manager's favourite. Like if you had to go, you can only keep one here, Jürgen, who you're keeping. I feel like he might be the one that he feels that way about. There's no messing around with contracts for him, or he was the one he wanted. And when we were in for a goalkeeper, there was talk of, well, Karius has got to stay here because it looks like Alisson's going to Real Madrid. And, well, it was Alisson or Alisson. And you can see, I think even now, I think the manager doesn't realise. I think the manager realised he was good, but I didn't think he realised how integral he was going to become. And I feel like he's absolutely top shelf in the manager's ideas.
He's, to me, Lizzie, it's a lot of it's a triumph of decision making. I mean, that you can say that about a lot of football, it's worth saying, but for me, and again, I think this is why the brilliance of Alisson actually continues to grow, is as he grows more and more experienced, the stuff in there, it's like game theory stuff at times. You know, when he decides, or when Liverpool decide it's all right for you to have a shot from it, and listen, we pay for that away at Leicester. I think Van Dijk should get something on that, but I think he thinks my keeper will deal with this. So you've got to be clear there are always trade-offs in these decisions. But for me, that's what you see from him all the time. You know, the best example is the late save from Elise, where he could try and come and smother it, but what he decides instead is, no, I know what you're going to do, and I know I can deal with it. And for me, that's the most incredible part, is that his body is obviously immaculate, but it's his brain that's making a lot of this be special.
Yeah, it's almost like he can see like 2 to 3 seconds ahead in the future. Yeah. that's how it feels sometimes. And there was that other save as well, where he sort of tips it past the post as well. I can't remember necessarily what shot that was, but he's absolutely brilliant, and I almost just think, like, I don't know where we'd necessarily be without him. And all this idea of like when people talk about the goal, oh yeah, but we shouldn't be seeing this much, and the goalie shouldn't be doing this, the goalie shouldn't be doing, well, what's the frigging point in spending that much money on a goalie like him then? Do you know what I mean? Like, balls will slip through. Like, your defence, your team is not perfect. However, you need your last line defence, which is our big, lovely, holy goalie, to be the best at what he does. And I truly believe that he is. He's so smart, he's so clever, and he does have a couple of slip-ups in him, but I tell you what, like, people always bring them up naturally, but when you weigh it up against just his game to game, by the way, like, no one talks about how good a goalie is when they've not made a ton of saves, when actually, like, that's a good game for a keeper, isn't it, really? Because they're not doing anything bloody wrong. And I agree with Paul. I think he's arguably the favourite. I think Paul, like, I looked the other week when he played him against Arsenal in the semi-final at home, and I was thinking, oh, poor Quivine, like how tough it must be to be playing behind that man. And then obviously, like he said, Kelleher's probably going to play in the League Cup, but like, if you are a Kelleher who's a great keeper, you're looking at Alisson and thinking, like, where's my bloody chance here?
You get to train with him every day.
Exactly.
That's your job's to learn from this fella.
So you're looking at the very, very best in the world, and that must be a joy. And I think you maybe seen the benefits of that in Nico Williams as well. There's been little signs of him this year, and I'm like, oh, you've changed a bit as a footballer. Yeah. And I've just on that wider point, I was like, they're trying to get him into the front three, because like, you're not dislodging Trent from this position. And Kelleher's got that really difficult job, and I think it's important that the manager, like, I wouldn't play Kelleher in the League Cup final for days like yesterday where Alisson's imperious. And as much as there's a lot of it's the right thing to do in football, there's a trophy at the end of it, and you should play your best 11, in my opinion. But I get why the manager's doing it.
But the manager's making a cultural point, isn't he?
Yeah, of course. I completely get what the manager's doing. I just think it's Chelsea in the League Cup final. You want to just beat them.
Go against everything Jürgen Klopp's about, though, wouldn't it?
But
do you know what I mean?
That's the thing I get, and I'm not having to go in the next day and manage Quivine Kelleher, you know. So I get that, because I would have an absolute cop on if I've played every game and then get leg for the final. It's not fair. But you have seen some managers do that as well.
Of course.
But it's a nice problem to have at right back. It's a nice problem to have in goal. I just wouldn't like to be the second man in that situation.
There's a thing that happens where, Emilia, I wrote on our agenda, we calm everything from about 70. Now, I don't think that's entirely the case in hindsight. I actually think one of the things that happens is Palace just grow a bit tired. A few of these long balls stop working for them. It's all a bit hard because they put everything into that 35 to 70 minute period. In the same way that we feel Liverpool grow a bit tired, I think Palace are just goosed by the time we get to 70, and it is just 2-1. The penalties become really controversial, and I don't really want to have an extended conversation about the ins and outs of it for a variety of reasons. But one of the parts of it is, for me, in hindsight, Liverpool had done the job by then.
Yeah,
and the penalty doesn't influence the result, and it suits the era to act as though it does, but I don't believe it does for a second.
No, it doesn't. I don't think it would have been any different, because what is it? Is it 88 minutes that we're on when it actually? I mean, realistically, what is it changing at that point? You were saying when we were watching it in the
back
pub,
in control then as
yeah,
well.
and they were completely. That's the point. And I think you were saying when we were watching it that about 18 minutes in, Palace looked goosed, like they really, really did, and they weren't the ones that had played against Arsenal on Thursday. So I think they get kind of buoyed and kind of carried through on like the adrenaline of that kind of 35-minute spell that they have, 35-minute spell where it looks like they're back in it again, and where we're sloppy and we're giving away chances, and where they kind of can feel like they're on top again. They kind of get carried through on that, on like the adrenaline alone. But then when we regain that control, they quickly realise how goosed they are, and that they can't keep up with us. And I think the fact that we put in that performance for the first kind of 30 minutes or so, when they're looking tired, they kind of, it flips because they've got that sense of hope, but then they're very obviously done in by the end of it.
I wasn't worried at the point of the pen, to be honest. No. I was just a bit like, I like you, I just thought, I went, whew, like got through this period, and I saw them bringing on, Ayew and Benteke, and I was a bit like, well, okay, you're losing some of the faster lads anyway. I mean, yeah, we know Benteke can hold the ball up well and whatever, but at that point I was sort of, I felt all right, and I just backed Liverpool to win. And listen, I actually backed us to score again, maybe towards the end, whether it be I did not think it'd be a penalty, but I actually thought we might score again and it'd be all right, and that we just needed to get through that little bit. But I can't be asked going into the penalty stuff as well, because sorry. No, go on. It's just like, I don't know. On first, it's all that conversation, isn't it, of whether the ball goes away from him goes away from him or not. But at the end of the day, the keeper's fouling him in the box.
Can't put someone in the air in the penalty box.
That's a foul anywhere else on the pitch.
I love peak internet stuff, and the one where they're sharing that Ferguson thing, he could have been killed, really had me in stitches. Yeah, I think it's a red card. Yeah.
I think as well, there's like, you always have to think of it of, if it's given against us, what do we do? And obviously we kick off about it, but realistically, there's no way Palace could realistically say they were good, that it was going to be 2-2. At that point in the game, they weren't scoring another goal, so it doesn't change anything in the sense that they weren't going to get anything.
Just on the other thing around, it's all right. On the other things around the penalty, one of the things that gets lost in it is when he hits it, Arnold, I go, don't do that. I literally said when we watched him, don't do that. And firstly, what the fuck do I know? Yeah. Secondly, the thing is, it actually is hugely similar to the goal against Arsenal, Paul. To the point that you wonder if Liverpool have worked on this. It's the same. It's the same ball. It's the same run. And then the other thing is, about the football that you said before you love. The really strange thing about him, I think, is in these instances, he reminds me a little bit of Suarez in that he doesn't look lightning. But once he's ahead of Joel Ward,
deceptive pace.
Joel Ward's finished. There's no getting back, and I think that's a really interesting part of him as a player. That if the ball's right at he times his run, then it really doesn't matter who's trying to defend him. He is away from them, and there is no coming back, and it results in the keeper colliding with him. Yeah,
in that deceptive pace thing, it's where you think, I don't know if you remember the Suarez goal in the derby where he legs Jagielka almost the whole length of the pitch,
and Jagielka wasn't slow even at the age he was at the time.
Yeah, exactly, and that's. And that's a bit like, the centre half's got him, but no, he just keeps getting that little bit ahead. The pen itself, I mean, I can understand. Listen, if I was a Crystal Palace fan, I'd be a bit annoyed, but I think it's like, it's almost showmanship. It's false. You know the game's gone, and is it a pen? Well, you can't just clatter a footballer in the box. Is the ball going away? Well, yeah, but I think does it need to be re-reffed? I don't know, but anyway, the thing was, I don't think they were going back into the game from that point. Yeah. Liverpool sort of got things back into control, but that ball from Trent is special. And it's a thing, isn't it, where you start taking things for granted. Well, what right back have you ever seen that can do that?
Yeah.
Ever.
Because it looks like a hacked clearance. Part of why I'm saying don't do that is because I'm thinking he's just punting it up the pitch and we're going to go from there. And it isn't. He is absolutely picked him out. He's picked him out. He's seen the run. It's unbelievable the way it arcs down towards him. He knows exactly what he's doing.
No, I know. It's a player who's grown up watching Steven Gerrard, even in his body shape and how you play that ball. We used to do it when you're playing on Bill Shankly playing fields or whatever with your mates. It was like you try and learn how to make that ball because you'd watch Steven Gerrard do one, or even Xabi Alonso to a point, but it's more the way Xabi Alonso would almost float it where Gerrard would drive it and Trent drives it forward, but as you say, the arc of the ball, the trajectory of it is phenomenal, and the fact that that's the norm with him as a 22, 23-year-old footballer. Scary, and doing it from right back. Beckham had something special in that right foot, and Trent's got it in equal capacity. Maybe not from a dead ball situation, but in game with a moving ball. I don't think there's anyone better.
You spoke about relationships before, Neil, and you were talking about the Jota Robertson left hand side, and you've just said something there, which is what I thought when that sort of ball from Trent went into Jota, it reminded me exactly of the Arsenal one, and I'm starting to think, is that a bit of a relationship? Because that was two players completely on a wavelength with each other. That was not pure coincidence that he just hit the ball and thought, I hope he's going to be there. He knew, and Jota knew what was going to happen. And I'm wondering whether you're going to start seeing like a little bit of a combined thing with the two of them. I mean, obviously we don't know when Mane and Salah come back who's going to play where. I know Jota's playing on the left. However, I think, if we have to, let's say Mane comes off in a game and Jota moves out left, it will not surprise me at all if you start seeing this Trent to Jota thing, because it was very intentional, and the way the two of them were just so in tune with each other, I thought was unbelievable. And
you'd almost prefer that to be the relationship without sounding like in the big picture, in the long term thing. If you're going to get two players that click, well, you want them to be the right side of 25. And like if Trent was getting this with Salah, say you go, oh, that's great, but I know we're going to hopefully get Mo a new contract. But you want one that's going to be for the ages, for the next. If there's telepathy like the way Gerrard and Torres, where you want to see for the next 5-7 years, and both of them can offer that. And I think if that turns into something that could be really special. The
other mad thing is, as the ball's moving through the air in his transformer-like way, Jota looked taller. Literally, just grew 4 or 5 inches, looked taller, got it under control, went back to being his normal size. It's one hell of a trick that he's got there. It is a massive win. Listen, it is a massive, massive, massive win from a Liverpool point of view. It's noticeable, as I said earlier on, Lizzie, Arsenal dropped points away at Burnley. In fact, home to Burnley, their fixture was markedly easier than ours. Burnley hadn't played for about 3/4 of the century, so maybe they weren't quite as fluent, but Arsenal do drop those points. The other thing I think, Lizzie, is did anyone else watch any of City versus Southampton?
I did,
yeah. So perfect, came to you then first, like I should have checked in advance. City, it was a painful watch, Lizzie, in that you felt like City were just about to make it happen all the way through that second half in a number of different ways. But actually, in hindsight, and it's one when you look at it back and you look at the numbers, they're not actually that creative, City. They don't have that many chances. 1.55 expected goals in total, only one chance, better than 0.2 XG in the whole match. Yeah. They weren't opening Southampton defend really well, don't get me wrong, but they weren't opening them up again and again.
No, they weren't. I mean, probably one of the best chances was off a Rodri shot, which was ridiculous, by the way. And I thought, in the first half when I was watching that and I saw Southampton win, Southampton scored, and then they have one offside, then they have the penalty shout, and at that point I went, oh, for God's sake, I know what's going to happen here. I know what's going to happen here. City are going to win bloody 2-1. That's just how it's going to happen. So they come out the second half, and City have that City period, which Southampton must have been anticipating. And I'm not lying, it was just Southampton with pin back, and it was wave after wave after wave. But like you said, a lot of the chances and a lot of the sorts of things they were trying to create were those sorts of extremely spectacular special moments from a De Bruyne. The Rodri shot was one that stuck out for me in particular. It felt inevitable because it was City, not necessarily because of the way they played.
Exactly that.
And there was, I know we're not doing a deep dive on that game, but there was a couple of standout performers there who done a really bloody good job on them. One of them being Salisu.
Yeah.
He was brilliant. And Southampton showed they're out to get a point. And I think I don't know if it was on the pink, which I heard it, but it was a good point, which I really quite liked, which was each team will, while that might have been a trip up for City, that's not to say that'll be a trip up for Liverpool. Just like if Palace are the ones that are going to cause Liverpool problems, that doesn't mean they're going to necessarily cause City problems. And Hasenhüttl got it spot on. And like I say, he's provided a little bit of a blueprint there. And listen, Pep had his big guns. He had his big guns on, and they just sort of. It was interesting to see them run out of ideas.
They ran out of ideas by 75.
Yeah.
I felt it was then a lot of like even the controversial pen was almost a bit like it was just a lad charging through the middle of the pitch and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
And I was that's what sort of I thought was interesting was they'd run in a way I've seen us run out of ideas this season as well. So don't get me wrong, it was more that by about 75 I thought, they haven't got 71 to 76. They don't create anything.
Yeah.
I know this because me and Steve had gamified it into whether or not we were going to have another pint. In that on 71 we said all right we won't because we didn't want to watch City win. So it was like if they get to 76 we'll have another pint. If they don't we won't. And then at 71 to 76 nothing happened and Steve went, well, get this pint in then.
Yeah.
But that was the territory of there was long periods where I was thinking it's just about to come, and then not only did it not come, there wasn't a chance, if you see what I mean. And that to me is interesting.
It is interesting, but I do think you've seen it before where they can come up with the death of things, and that's the thing with City. And that's why I do believe like we shouldn't, not to be the pessimist, more to be a realist, like we shouldn't look too much into that result, because I think that was a blip, and that any other game they have one chance dropped to one fella.
Yeah, you just need
Of course, it's what you need.
That's what, and the reaction to it after this was like, after like the Tottenham game for us and stuff like that, is like other teams don't have blips. Well, of course they do. And I've been talking a lot around the title races, and like we've become too obsessed with the 99, 100 points, 97 point season. That's not traditional. That's not how title races.
City is setting that precedent though, and it's hard when you've got to try and keep up with it.
They are, but then they do the thing that changes title races, which is what happened the other day, and that's why. After as a Brentford, after the manager gives it the big one on the pitch, he's just going, this isn't done yet. Don't give up. And well, this weekend there you go, and then you're within. If you beat Leeds, then you're within 6 points. You've got to go to City. These things, and then who says that City don't draw another game, or as perfect.
They've got to get battered 3-0. I think just in our heads we've sort of convinced ourselves we need someone to go and take them to the cleaners, and that's not the case.
They can draw at Manchester United. They can draw.
Tottenham is a big one.
Tottenham, Wolves. It doesn't matter.
Still got to go to Molineux.
That's it. And these are but don't get me wrong. We can drop points, but we can also be as perfect as what City are. And the whole once it's 6 points clear that we give up nowadays, I understand it. And we've been in title races where they've gone and won 14 games on the bounce, and you sort of go, wow, well, we won 13, it wasn't enough. I get that, and that can still be the thing, but it also isn't guaranteed that's the way it's going to be. And that Southampton result sort of gives you a bit of perspective that's how things can change.
The other thing to give a bit of perspective, Emilia, just to finish us off, the week and the AFCON period. The AFCON period was, from a Liverpool supporter's perspective, from last fucking July. It was like this thing that was on the horizon that was going to absolutely pull the rug from under Liverpool, and everyone lost their heads about it for a long period. And it actually, in the end, couldn't have gone much better. Most of the players should be back by the time we play Leicester on the Thursday night. They may not all be back for when we play Cardiff in the Cup, but it could not have gone any better. This chat around the inevitable decline was significantly overstated, and it's something that should be remembered. But it also shows the quality and togetherness of the lads who've been around. We've criticised a couple of them during this game, and it may well be that they're not in every single match over and over, but these lads have done Liverpool proud. They couldn't have done any more. It couldn't have gone any better.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, you have missed them, but we haven't when you look at the results. I think you've missed them in terms of we're so used to watching Liverpool play a certain way, and we've done a brilliant, not imitation of that, but we've kind of managed to continue to do that in the absence of the lads that we would like to have seen on the pitch. But I think the fact that the results have fallen the way that they have while you've still been going, you miss Mo and you miss Sadio and you miss
Keita
and you miss Thiago and you miss Elliott.
Yeah.
There's other footballers here.
Me and Steve were saying this when we were walking for our tea last night, that like between obviously you've got injuries, the kind of the COVID spell and AFCON, it's felt like it's been a bit of a stage where you've just been going, just get through it and worrying like, is it going to get worse before it gets better? But actually it's been absolutely fine. Imagine being Everton. Do you know what I mean? Like genuinely, like that's the extent of our spell of like, oh God, hope that we manage to weather this storm and get through this. And that storm is just hoping that the three lads come back from AFCON and that everything's still fine. And it is absolutely fine. Imagine like having to live through a protracted period of just things being consistently awful and it coming from all these different directions. But it's an aside, but basically it's been absolutely fine. And I think the likes of Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain should be completely commended for the fact that at no point have we had any cause to worry and that we're still absolutely fucking brilliant.
We're still at everything. Liverpool can win 4 trophies this season. Liverpool can win 0 trophies this season. But the very fact that you can say the sentence, Liverpool can win 4 trophies when they have now got through AFCON, they've got through a COVID issue, they've got through a mini little bit of an injury crisis on top of those other 2 things as well. Liverpool have hung in there, and it is worth pointing that out. Liverpool have hung in there. We should all hang in there too. Download the Anfield Wrap app if you want more of this sort of thing. There's a lot more of it around Crystal Palace, and we've got loads coming up across the next couple of weeks. But in the meantime, thank you very much to Andy Heaton for producing, Paul Senior, Lizzi Doyle and Emilia Bona. The Reds remain on the march.